Yeah, the doctor's in the house. Little bit of extra this weekend. So, welcome everybody to Dr. Ron Unfiltered, Uncensored, where I've been thinking about something. So, I said, let me just turn on the mic and get it out there. And it's about the collapse of trust in our modern medical science. And when the editors of the world's most prestigious journals admit the system is broken, it's no longer skepticism, it's reality. So there are moments in history when truth does not come from outsiders, whistleblowers, or skeptics. It comes from the inside, from the very people tasked with protecting the integrity of the system. And when those people speak, you don't ignore it. You engrave it in your memory because what they are revealing is not a flaw, it's a fracture in the foundation. So what am I talking about? Well, over the past 2 decades, 2 of the most influential figures in modern medical publishing is Marsha Angel and Richard Horton. They both have issued statements that should have sent shockwaves through medicine, but they didn't, and I've done programs explaining why that didn't happen. They were noted and then quietly buried in jails after decades at the helm of the New England Journal of Medicine came to a sobering conclusion. Now, this is 20 years ago, that much of the clinical research physicians rely on is no longer trustworthy. Richard Horton, a leading voice at the Lancet, went even further, suggesting that a significant portion of published scientific literature may be fundamentally flawed and outright false. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not fringe outliers, not fringe. They are institutional confessions. So what's broken and why does it matter? Well, here let's strip this down to first principles. Modern medicine presents itself as what? Evidence-based. We've heard that all through COVID, evidence-based. But what happens when the evidence itself is compromised? You just don't get bad data. You get a cascade failure across the entire system, like I talked about in my last podcast. What happens with medical testing? It can start a domino effect. So what happens? Well, there are financial conflicts and they drive outcomes. Sorry to say that. But pharmaceutical funding dominates clinical trials. That alone doesn't invalidate the results, but it introduces a directional bias. When billions are at stake, neutrality becomes theoretical at best. Study, design, endpoint selection, and data interpretation begin to subtly favor profitable conclusions. Not always fraud, but very often influence. And statistical manipulation masks weak signals. Suppose, there's only a small sample size, marginal effects in that sample size, and flexible endpoints. They change the endpoints. They're not minor technicalities, ladies and gentlemen. They are structural vulnerabilities. Through practices like selective reporting and post hoc hypotheses, they shape weak and inconclusive findings and can be reformed as statistically significant. Let me repeat that because I still don't have my full speech back here. Through practices like selective reporting and post hoc hypothesis shaping, weak or inconclusive findings can be reframed as statistically significant. And what's the result of that? You get a body of literature that looks robust on paper but lacks reproducibility in the real world. And we'll go into another time how many papers are retracted, but they make the back page, not the front page. And you know what happens? These positive findings get published. The negative findings, they just disappear. You never see them. This creates an illusion of consensus where there actually none exists. Clinicians reading the literature believe they are seeing the full picture, but you know what? They are not. They're seeing a curated version of reality. Researchers are not immune to pressure, believe me. Funding, their tenure, their prestige, they are tied to publishing impactful results. So what happens? Data gets massaged, hypotheses get retrofitted, narratives get crafted, not out of malice necessarily, but out of survival within the system that they have to work in. And the downstream effect is not really this is not just an academic problem. It's a clinical problem because flawed research leads to and informs treatment guidelines. We talked about guidelines before. A lot of physicians are just tied to them. This flawed research can result in drug approvals and standard of care protocols. It directly affects the outcome of patients. Physicians believe they are practicing evidence-based medicine, but if the evidence is distorted, then the care, no matter how well intentions, rests on unstable ground. That's that inverted pyramidal proliferation of theoretical assumptions. It's all based on the tip of the triangle, not the base of the triangle. It can fall over. So here's what gets me concerned. Most people, including a lot of professionals, assume that peer review guarantees accuracy, that prestigious journals ensure integrity, and that consensus equals truth. But Angel and Horton are telling us something very different. That authority does not equal reliability, and that the system we've trusted to self correct may be reinforcing its own blind spots. I've talked about this a number of times. The Alzheimer's research paper that involved fudging the MRIs that led to billions of dollars in research and drugs given to patients, and it was all based on a study that was manipulated. So you say, why is this being suppressed? Well, because acknowledging that there's a problem will have consequences. If everybody begins to question the integrity of medical research, well, trusted institutions will decline. Industry influence will come under more scrutiny, and clinical guidelines lose their unquestioned authority. There is no not a small This is not a small disruption, it's a paradigm shift, and systems really expose their own weaknesses voluntarily, like the cholesterol syndrome. It's crazy. I mean, cholesterol doesn't is not the problem. It's the inflammation that precedes it, but it never made the guidelines, it never made the protocols. All we know is LDL, HDL, and so forth, right? The cholesterol derangement syndrome is alive and well. So where do we go? Well, we can't abandon medicine. That is not what I'm even talking about. But we have to evolve in how we interpret it. So what does that framework look like? Well, treat research as data, not as doctrine. Prioritize clinical outcomes over statistical significance. Value mechanistic understanding and really value physiology. Integrate lifestyle, environment, and root cause medicine. What really caused this problem? Maintain healthy skepticism even toward consensus, because real science is not about certainty, it's about continuous questioning. Okay, because we know that Epigenetics accounts for or more than 92% of diseases. It's not genetics, and we don't get very many studies about lifestyle, environment, and root causes. If we got to the silent cause, the inflammation, we would not get to the diseases that we're seeing today. So let me give you my take. What Marcia Angell and Richard Horton are describing is not a temporary breakdown. It's not a bad decade. It's not a few flawed studies, but it's a system that is operating exactly as it was designed to operate. And that's the part we all miss. The system isn't failing, but it's incentivized. You don't get widespread bias by accident. How do you get it? You get it when funding rewards outcomes, when careers depend on publication volumes, when journals chase impact over truth, when industry influences the pipeline from hypothesis to the headline. And what do we end up with? A system that produces consistent, predictable distortion while maintaining the appearance of scientific rigor. It's no wonder patients feel lost. Patients, have you ever heard or have you ever said to your doctor, "Doctor, I've been everywhere and nobody can figure out what's wrong." That's part of the reason because the system is optimized for diagnosing late stage disease, matching symptoms to drugs, a pill for an ill, and following standardized protocols. It is not optimized for early dysfunction, for root causes, for metabolic and mitochondrial health, and environmental and lifestyle drivers. Because there's not a blood test, there's not a protocol for this. This is actually listening to your patient who's complaining, "I don't have enough energy, I have brain fog," all before any test is abnormal. So patients fall through the cracks, not because your doctor doesn't care, it's because of the framework itself that he has to work in. So we need to upgrade evidence-based medicine, right? So this isn't about anti-science, it's about anti-distorted science. True science asks better questions. It doesn't just refine bad answers. So let's move away from what does the study say? But instead of saying that, let's say, does this make biological sense? Can this be reproduced in real patients? Does this study align with how the body actually works? That's physiology. Because if it doesn't align with physiology, it doesn't matter how statistically significant it is. Somewhere where along the way, we downgraded clinical experience. We stopped listening to people. We elevated randomized trials to the top of the pyramid and pushed everything else down. But here's the reality: a seasoned clinician observing thousands of patients over decades often sees patterns that no short term study ever captures. That's not unscientific, that's pattern recognition at the highest level. As Dr. Smith says, if you throw a rock off the top of a building and it lands on the ground, you don't need a double blind controlled study. You know that the rock fell to the ground. So, what do we do with all this? We don't burn the system down. We become smarter navigators. What does that mean? We question and we question and we question without being cynical. We learn without becoming dogmatic. We integrate research with real world outcomes. And most importantly, independent thinking. Independent thinking. Because the future of medicine isn't going to come from blindly following guidelines. It's going to come from clinicians and you, the patient, who are willing to ask, what if we've been looking at this in the wrong way? Is there another way we can look at it? Is there something else that we can do? When insiders like Angel and Horton at the highest level tell you the system is compromised, you don't panic. What do? You wake up. You wake up, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. The future of medicine will not be built on blind trust, believe me. It will be built on transparency, accountability, and returning to our basic first principles. And as I tell you every week, I'm Dr. Ron. I don't filter the truth, I amplify it. I look forward to bringing you more podcasts on the inside of medicine. I have over 60 years of experience here. Some of you know my background in being a charter member of emergency physicians before it became a specialty, uh, board certified in family practice, a fellow of the American Academy of Family Practice, a lifetime member, an acupuncturist with certificates in both pain management and back pain and other things. Traveled to Europe to study with Hans Nieper in Germany. Spent a lot of time with Dr. Jennifer Chu at the University of Pennsylvania. So, with what I've been doing for my own patients when I was in practice and the 60 years of experience, I want to try and bring that to you. So, with that, past 17 minutes already. Wow. Let's end this and we'll continue more next week. Thank you for listening and be well and God bless.
Hey everybody, Dr. Ron's finished for today. I hope you got some good wisdom for what the man had to say. If it's all about good health, he's the man you got to see. He has a lot more answers for you. So tune in next week when the doctor is in the house. Or when the doctor is in the house. And let the doctor know what's bothering you. When the doctor is in the house, the doctor is in the house, the doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you. I'm sure he can tell you just what to do. The doctor is in the house, the doctor is in the house. Let the doctor know what's bothering you when the doctor is in